Episode 1, 737. To kick this one off, Tuco had just left the junkyard and Walter starts calculating how many deals he will need to in order to pay off his medical bills, and he concludes that he will need to do 11 more deals for $800,000, and then he can leave the drug business. Tuco then storms back and demands Jesse and Walter help him resuscitate his friend Nodos, who he just beat senseless before leaving. But Walter tells Tuco that Nodos is dead. Tuco's other henchman Gonzo hides the body under a car, and they angrily leave. Walter returns home scared shitless, and Skylar knows something is up with him. That night, Walter meets with Jesse, and Jesse purchases a gun and wants to kill Tuco before he can get to them, as he's a maniac. Walter comes up with the idea that they should poison him with ricin because it's undetectable and untraceable. Meanwhile, Hank and Gomez start investigating the warehouse break-in that occurred when someone stole the barrel of methylamine, and they don't realize they are watching Jesse and Walter on the security footage. Then they go to the junkyard where the bodies of Gonzo and Nodos have been found, and Gonzo died by getting smashed by a car. Hank sends Walter a picture joking around with him, but Walter knows this means Tuco will be after him and Jesse next. Walter starts freaking out and wants to pack his and his family's bags and flee, but then Jesse calls him and he is in his front yard. Walter goes outside and sees Tuco in the back seat with a gun to Jesse's head, and he orders Walter to get in the car. Episode 2, Grilled. Tuco forces Jesse to drive them to a remote hideout in the desert where he is taking care of his sick uncle Hector Salamanca. If you've watched my Better Call Saul series, you know who Hector is. But if not, he's a former drug kingpin that is now paralyzed throughout most of his body due to a stroke Nacho Vargas caused, and the only way he talked to anyone is by a bell strapped to his wheelchair. Tuco tells them that Hank and the DEA are now on his ass because they found the bodies at the junkyard and know they are a part of Tuco's crew. Tuco tells Walter about a plan. He has to take Walter to Mexico with him and run a new cooking operation from the middle of the jungle, and Walter obviously is not a fan of this idea. Walter just keeps trying to get Tuco to take the ricin that they stashed inside a bag of meth, so he will die of natural causes. While it is all going on, Hector keeps trying to warn Tuco that these two are not to be trusted, and eventually, Tuco attempts to kill Jesse as he is so enraged, but Jesse manages to shoot him in the torso, and they escape. Back in Albuquerque, Skylar is worried where Walter disappeared to, and she begs Hank to go and find him. Skylar learns from Marie that Walter has a second phone she didn't know about, and Skylar assumes this is the phone he uses to do his marijuana deals with Jesse Pinkman. Hank then tracks Jesse's car after hearing of this, and it leads him to Tuco's hideout in the desert, and a shootout ensues. Hank ends up killing Tuco in self-defense. Walter sees Hank from a ways away, and he and Jesse bury the gun and run off into the desert. Episode 3, Bit by a Dead Bee. Out in the desert, Walter is trying to think of an excuse for being absent from his family, and he tells Jesse they should split up and make their way back, away from each other so it doesn't look suspicious. They do just that, and Walter goes into a store and acts like he's in a daze, and it ends up with him in the hospital, and when he wakes up, he says he doesn't remember anything that happened the last few days. Walter then goes through a psychiatric evaluation where he acts perfectly fine and wants to be released to his family. Elsewhere, Jesse makes his way back, but he sees that all the police and the DEA are after him since Hank knows Jesse's car was out in the desert with Tuco at his hideout. Jesse meets up with Badger, and Badger helps him move the RV and all of the cooking stuff inside of it to a different location that isn't near his house, where the police can search it. Jesse ends up getting the RV towed to another car lot, where he will pay a daily parking fee. A few hours later, Jesse makes sure all evidence is gone, and he allows the DEA to find him at a nearby motel, and he is taken into the station for questioning. Jesse says he was at the motel all weekend and nowhere near a desert hideout. They bring Hector in as well, and Hank wanted him to identify the man that was at the hideout with him. But Hector doesn't want to work with the police because he doesn't trust they'll do right by him. Jesse is then released as they have no concrete evidence, but they do take all of his money. Hank is now under the impression Jesse is the one cooking the new blue meth that they found at Tuco's hideout and just needs proof. Walter heads home, but Skylar won't look at him when he lies about having a second phone, and she knows it. Episode 4, Down. Jesse meets with Walter and says he needs money to pay for the towing, and he doesn't have any money. But all Walter gives him is $600 as it's not his fault Jesse got caught. To make matters even worse, Jesse learns that his parents have summoned a lawyer and are ordering him to vacate his aunt's house immediately as they want to sell it, and it's not his. His mother saw the meth lab in the basement, and it was the last straw. At the White House, there's definitely some tension in the air, and Skylar wants nothing to do with Walter at the moment, as he won't be honest with her and still won't admit to having a second phone, so she believes he is cheating on her. She continues to leave without telling Walter where she is going. Jesse has nowhere to go and is currently homeless, so he has no choice but to sneak into the car a lot and sleep in the RV. The following morning, Clovis finds Jesse sleeping in the RV and orders Jesse to pay him for the week. But Jesse has no money, and Clovis threatens to sell the RV and everything in it since it is on his property. A little later, Jesse gets in the RV and drives through the locked gate to escape. He heads over to Walter's house, where Walter comes out to confront him, and when Walter calls Jesse a pathetic junkie with no life, they get into a fight with one another. After Jesse gets the upper hand, Walter gives in and splits his current money with him 50-50. The episode closes with Skylar parked outside a convenience store smoking a cigarette even though she is pregnant. Episode 5. Breakage. Walter continues his cancer treatment with his doctor, but the hospital bills are mounting up and he is running out of money. Hank tells his boss that a name Heisenberg they've been hearing on the streets is responsible for the blue meth, and Hank believes it is Jesse Pinkman. Hank's boss has been so impressed with him lately that he offers him a promotion, but he would have to move to El Paso, Texas. He is elated, but has a panic attack on an elevator and recovers quickly. With the money he got from Walt, Jesse goes to Clovis and pays his fees and for the damages he caused to the fences. He then goes to look at houses and he finds a small duplex that he likes, and it is managed by a young woman, Jane Margolis, who Jesse falls in love with at first sight. Jesse pays up front for the rent and the deposit, and it is his. Walter convinces Jesse to go out and cook again and just be smart and wary of the DEA snooping around. Jesse tells Walt they won't be dealing with a distributor again because it's too dangerous, and Jesse will hire his friends as dealers, and they will sell that way instead of selling in bulk to a deranged lunatic like Tuco. Jesse gets his boys Skinny Pete, Badger, and Combo to be their dealers. Skinny Pete gets robbed one night, and Walter is not happy with Jesse when he finds out about it, and says they need to do something about it, or people will think they can rob them whenever they want. Walter gives Jesse a gun and tells him to handle the thief. Episode 6. Peekaboo. Jesse goes to the house of the thieves, but they aren't home, and the only person there is a small 5-year boy watching TV, and this kills Jesse's mood because he doesn't want to leave this kid without his parents, and that's what he was sent there to do. Meanwhile, Skylar calls Gretchen and thanks her again for paying for Walter's treatment, and Gretchen is confused because they aren't paying for it, but doesn't tell Skylar the truth. Gretchen asks Skylar if she wants to meet that afternoon. A few hours pass, and when Walter returns home from school, he finds Gretchen talking to Skylar in the living room, and he freaks out. Walter walks Gretchen out and begs her not to tell Skylar about the money, and Gretchen tells him she doesn't want to be involved in any of his lies, and she leaves. At the junkie house, the parents return home with a stolen ATM, and Jesse makes his presence known immediately. Jesse orders them to give him the drugs and the money that they stole, but they say they already spent all the money, and then the woman tries using the little boy as a shield so Jesse won't hurt her. Spudge says he can have his money back, but they need to find a way to break open the ATM. When Jesse isn't looking, the woman knocks Jesse out cold. Back at the White House, Skylar informs Walter that Gretchen said she can't pay for Walter's treatment anymore, and Skylar is upset because she has no idea how they will pay for it themselves. But Walter says they will find a way. At Spudge's house, Jesse wakes up completely dazed and sees Spudge and the female arguing, and the female pushes the ATM on Spudge's head, killing him. She then smokes meth and lays down while Jesse works on clearing his fingerprints from everything he might have touched, and then the ATM opens up with cash coming out everywhere. Jesse calls the cops to come get the boy, and he bounces. Episode 7. Negro y Azul. Walter keeps trying to get a hold of Jesse, but is having no luck, and Jesse is hiding out after his encounter with Spudge, and he's also not providing any of his dealers with product, so that means no money is coming in at the moment. Walter decides to deliver the product himself and learns that everyone on the streets is under the impression Jesse killed Spudge for robbing him, and he is somewhat feared now, which is a good thing because it shouldn't happen again. Walter uses this reputation to his advantage and thinks it is about time they expand their territory and make even more money than they are now. Elsewhere, knowing that they need money desperately, Skylar goes out job hunting and eventually lands an accounting job with her previous boss, Ted Beneke. Jesse continues to get close with Jane, and there is definitely some romance blossoming in the air. Hank starts his new job at El Paso, but he feels like he doesn't really fit in with the others, and he is considered different than the others workers there. They are out for an investigation one day whenever the task force comes upon a severed head of an informant attached to a turtle, and he gets sick as he still has a little post-traumatic stress from killing Tuco. His fellow agents make fun of him for this, but then out of nowhere, an explosive that was strapped to the tortoise goes off and kills several of the agents there. Luckily, Hank suffered no injuries, but it's just another scar he's going to have to deal with. Episode 8. Better Call Saul. Badger is set to do a deal with a new customer, and he believes the guy is an undercover cop, but for some reason still sells him a little baggie, and Badger is arrested for meth distributing. Jesse and Jane spend the night together, and in the morning, he asks if she wants to smoke some weed, but she declines as she is in drug recovery and she's been clean for 18 months. Jesse then learns from Combo that Badger has been arrested, and that's why he doesn't have cut yet. Hank returns back to the DEA office in Albuquerque as he has decided the El Paso scene wasn't for him, and he kind of has PTSD from the turtle explosion. Gomez informs Hank that they arrested Badger with the blue meth. Jesse tells Walter about the arrest, and they go to an office for an attorney named Saul Goodman, and they want him to represent Badger and get him free. Walter fakes as Badger's uncle and pays Saul 10 grand on the spot to go get Badger out on bail, but Saul kicks him out for trying to bribe him. That night, Jesse and Walter get some ski masks, and they kidnap Saul and take him out into the desert to scare him into taking Badger's case. It works, and Saul tells them each to put $1 in his pocket, and he will officially be their lawyer, so they have attorney-client privilege. Saul tells them the only way Badger can get out is if they have someone else take the fall, and someone has to go to prison. They then pay a bald man 30 grand to take the fall and say he is Heisenberg. The plan works, and the man is arrested the next day. When the DEA is celebrating taking down Heisenberg, Hank feels it was too easy and thinks they got it wrong. Saul visits Walter at the high school and says he knows Walter is the true Heisenberg, and he wants to be his consigliere for his meth operation. Saul promises him he will make more money than he's ever dreamed of with them working together, and he has many connections. Episode 9. 4 days out. Walter realizes that his health is quickly deteriorating, and he's coughing up more blood than he ever has, and after calculating the numbers with Saul, Walt realizes there isn't much money left for his family after paying Saul his retainer and paying the random dude 30 grand to take the fall for Badger. Walter tells his family that he is going to go spend some time with his mother to get away, but really it is just an excuse to go out in the desert with Jesse and have a cooking marathon as he needs money quickly, and a lot of it. The cook trip goes just expected, cooking 42 pounds of meth, but when they are set to return back to town, Jesse realizes he left the keys in the ignition and the battery is completely dead. They try starting the generator with some gas from the RV, but the generator catches fire after Jesse split gas all over it. Jesse uses the rest of their water to pour out the fire, which Walter looks at him in stupidity as they have no water now. They spend 4 days out in the desert barely surviving until Walter is able to use his brilliant chemistry mind to build a makeshift battery that gives them enough power to jumpstart the RV, and they return home finally. A few days later, Walter meets with the doctor and is told that his cancer is in remission, which his family is ecstatic to hear. But for some reason, Walter goes into the bathroom and punches the mirror in anger. Episode 10. Over. Walter tells Jesse now that his cancer is in remission, he's out of the drug game for good, and he got done what he needed to get done. Skylar throws a huge party to celebrate, and Walter gets really drunk and even gets Walt Jr. drunk, which Hank isn't a fan of because Jr. is underage. Everyone thought Walter would be happy to be in remission, but it seems as it has made him worse and even more irritable. Skylar is at work where she bumps into Ted, and she tells Ted about Walter's condition and how he is really starting to annoy her with his pessimism, and it's clear that Ted definitely has a thing for Skylar. Jesse and Jane continue to grow their relationship, but when Jane's father starts showing up, Jane doesn't introduce Jesse as her boyfriend, so Jesse feels she is ashamed of him. When Donald leaves, Jesse asks Jane what she believes they are, and she says they are just friends with benefits, which upsets him, so he leaves. Skylar and Ted start to flirt with each other hardcore, and it's really clear that she's going to cheat on Walter at some point or another, if not already has. Meanwhile, Walt is working on fixing their water heater, and he goes to the hardware store for materials, and he sees a few kids there buying everything they need to cook meth, and tells them they're buying the wrong stuff, which scares them off. When he gets outside, he sees them in an RV, realizing they're doing the same thing he did, and he warns them to stay off his territory, so maybe he is back in the game. Episode 11. Mandala. One of Jesse's dealers, Combo, is murdered by a rival drug gang for stepping on their territory at the request of Walter. This scares Skinny Pete off, so he tells Jesse he no longer wants to deal drugs for him. Now with no one to sell the drugs, Walter goes to Saul and sees if he has any recommendations to sell to, and Saul tells him about a local drug lord named Gustavo Fring that might be interested in buying his product if it's really as good as everyone says it is. Gus owns a local fast food chain called Los Palos Hermanos, and Walter goes to meet with this mysterious man. Once there, Gus says he has some interest in buying Walter's product as the purity is unreal, but he thinks Jesse is a liability because he has a drug problem and he likes things to be spick and span clean in his drug network. Meanwhile, Jesse is going even further with his drug problem, and he feels responsible for getting Combo killed, so he gets back into hard drugs and even convinces Jane to join him, ending her sobriety. She introduces him to heroin, and it's only downhill from there, as many know. At Skylar's workplace, she is going over the books and realizes that Ted is engaging in tax evasion, but does not report it to the IRS because they have history together and she still has a thing for him. Walter and Gus come to a deal, and Gus wants to buy the remaining inventory Walter has immediately, so he has to go get it. But then Skylar calls him and tells him she is going into labor. Episode 12. Phoenix. Walter decides to deliver the drugs instead of being present for his daughter's birth. Jesse calls Walter and wants his share of the money that he just sold to Gus. But Walter says he will get his payment when he is sure that Jesse is not on any drugs because he's doing all the legwork while Jesse is going around getting high. Jane's father, Donald, finds out about the heroin use, and he tells Jane she is going back to rehab the following day, and he's so disappointed in her for using again, and he blames Jesse for being a bad influence on her. Walter has to come up with $200,000 to undergo surgery to remove a tumor from his brain, so his son Junior sets up a donation page to receive money for the medical expenses, and Saul uses this as the perfect opportunity to launder money and make it appear clean. They deposit large amounts from fake names pretty much just like he did in Better Call Saul with his scamming ways. Meanwhile, Jane finds out from Jesse that Walter owes him a shitload of money, and she blackmails Walter into paying Jesse his share, or else she will reveal his identity to the police. Since she's going to rehab the following day, she decides to get high with Jesse one last time, and they smoke heroin and pass out on the bed. Walter shows up to talk some sense into Jesse about his life choices, and he finds both of them high as kites completely in a different reality. He tries to wake Jesse, but then Jane starts convulsing and vomiting, and instead of waking her up to save her life, Walter lets her overdose and suffocate to death. He watches her die and leaves. Episode 13. ABQ. Season finale. Jesse wakes up and tries to resuscitate Jane, but to no avail, and he realizes she is dead. He calls Walter and asks for help on what to do, and Walter tells Jesse he knows who to call. A man by the name of Mike Ehrmantraut then shows up and cleans the whole apartment and stages it as an accident. Mike is Saul's private investigator and right-hand man, also a main character from Better Call Saul. Mike coaches Jesse on what he will say to the police when they arrive to inspect Jane's body for an overdose. Donald is heartbroken when he arrives and sees his daughter dead. At the DEA office, Hank reports to his agents that Heisenberg is still on the street, and they took down the wrong guy as the Blue Sky meth is still showing up in local areas. Walter then goes to talk to Jesse, who is at a trap house that Mike took him to get away and clear his head. Walter comforts Jesse as Jesse blames himself for Jane dying, and he keeps saying it should have been him instead. Walt Jr.'s donation site is receiving so many large donations that a local news journal wants to interview the family and see how they feel that so many people care about Walter's health. As the interview goes on, Walter doesn't know how to feel, and he hopes the website isn't bringing too much attention to the finance aspects of everything. Elsewhere, Gus is shocked to learn that Walter's brother-in-law is a DEA agent as he was at their office donating to their agency, hiding in plain sight, and they don't realize he's a drug kingpin. Walter takes Jesse to a rehab facility to get help, and then he heads to the hospital for his surgery. When he is about to go under, Skylar asks him for his phone, and he groggily says, "Which one?" And she knows he has two now. A week later, he is released, and Skylar says she is taking the kids, and they are going to stay with Hank and Marie for a week, and she wants Walter out of the house before they return. She knows he has been lying about everything, including the payment from Elliot, and he never visited his mother like he said. The season ends with her saying, "Whatever it is, I'm afraid to know," and she drives away. And that is it for Season 2 of Breaking Bad. We'll do Season 3 next, so I hope you can check that one out. There will be a direct link on the screen after it is uploaded. Thanks for watching.